Welcome to another episode of the Left of Lansing podcast with Pat Johnston. A progressive insight into Michigan's political and cultural world. And of course, an entertaining podcast designed to shine a light on how to make Michigan's political machine work for the people. Now, from the Left of Lansing headquarters, located in his attic, here's the award-winning Pat Johnston.
Oh, yeah! Welcome to another edition of Michigan's premier progressive podcast. I am Pat Johnston, and what can I say? I really do believe the power of Left of Lansing is becoming a real thing. Just hours after I criticize Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer on making a huge political blunder on waiting so long to call that special election race for the vacant Senate seat in Bay, Midland, and Saginaw counties, Governor Whitmer announced the primaries for that seat will take place this winter, with the general election set for the first week in May. Now, I said it was a major mistake to leave that seat open because it could come back to haunt Democrats in that area. And well, all I can conclude is that Whitmer and her people, I'm sure, listened to my common sense, progressive voice last week and said, that Pat Johnston, he's right. Let's light this candle now. Well, at least that's what I like to think. But she did it finally, and it's about time. I don't care exactly why. But I'm still worried leaving that seat open for such a long time will haunt Democrats, but we'll see. Also, before the news gets too old here, let's highlight how everyone's favorite racist MAGA Michigan State House Republican, Josh Schreiber, who represents Oxford, hey, everyone must be proud there, introduced a bill that would allow businesses to discriminate against women who've received abortion care. Oh, that's freedom, right? That's just freedom. We believe in freedom, right, MAGA Republicans? Freedom! Hey, and this bill has 5 co-sponsors as well, including Republicans Matt Maddock from Milford, Joseph Fox from Fremont, Steve Cara from Three Rivers, and Cam Cavett of Sheboygan. Freedom. But what did you expect from white Christian nationalist nutballs and misogynists? But then again, this is who's running your state house right now. And it's no wonder why these same people have no problem devoting their lives to dear leader Trump, a guy who palled around with and declared his complete friendship to a child sex trafficker. Remember to subscribe to the show wherever you're listening and give it a good 5-star review. Plus, don't forget to subscribe and like the videos that I'm providing on the Left of Lansing YouTube channel as well. Coming up in a few moments, Denzel McCampbell will stop by to talk with us here in a bit. Denzel's a proud Democratic Socialist who defeated Democratic State Representative Karen Whitsett for the District 7 seat on the Detroit City Council last month. Now, Whitsett's a Democrat in name only and really is, in fact, part of the Matt Hall MAGA Republican majority in the State House, and she's the last thing that Detroiters really need. Even though Denzel McCampbell got the most votes in that primary race, he and Whitsett were the top 2 vote getters, meaning they'll face off again in November, and Karen Whitsett's got the backing of some big money donors. But a la Zoran Mamdani in New York City, Denzel McCampbell is proving that you can inspire people with a strong populist working class agenda. People who feel like politics has ignored them at every step in their lives. And because of that strong populist working class agenda and going around and knocking on everybody's door and talking with them one-on-one, Denzel McCampbell won the primary. And it's why he's getting the support of many in that District 7 seat, including many Democratic office holders in that area. We'll talk more about Denzel McCampbell's campaign here in just a few moments. Then, in my last call, I have to cover how Robert Kennedy's latest actions on vaccines is a national security threat, and it's going to cost lives. But first, I haven't made an endorsement in the Democratic primary race to become Michigan's next United States Senator. Actually, let me rephrase. I haven't made an endorsement yet between Dr. Abdul El-Sayed and State Senator Mallory McMorrow, but I think I pretty much made it clear that I would never, ever endorse Democratic Congresswoman Haley Stevens. Establishment Democrats, though, are backing Stevenson's, but that's not really a good thing nowadays, considering how Democrats are viewed quite poorly by their own base. Or it's really Democratic leaders who are viewed poorly by their base voters. And that's why I was not particularly stunned when Former Democratic Michigan House Speaker Joe Tate announced that he would endorse Haley Stevens. Now, Tate was originally going to run for that Senate seat, but he could never gain traction. Same with his original idea, I guess, to become Detroit's next mayor. But again, he never gained traction for that race as well. But really, how could Joe Tate ever gain traction with Democratic voters in Detroit or in the entire state of Michigan? Joe Tate presided over one of the worst political disasters in House Speaker history when he mangled the lame duck session last year. He allowed then Minority Leader Matt Hall to call all of the shots, while Representative Karen Whitsett defected from Democrats to join Matt Hall and the MAGA House Republicans. And rather than play hardball and use his power as House Speaker, or really even use the microphone, Tate retreated and killed a number of common sense, progressive bills during that lame duck session last year before Republicans gained control of the state house. And that meant bills like polluter pay, water affordability in Detroit, banning the sales of 3D ghost guns, and other bills languished and were gone forever. Democrats had the state trifecta for just 2 years, and Joe Tate, during that time, chose to lead by weakness. Worse, he ran to appease corporate donors. Now, next week, I'm going to speak with Tom Perkins, who wrote a story in The Guardian detailing how Governor Whitmer ousted a clean energy advocate on the Michigan Public Service Commission and replaced that person with someone that DTE Energy wanted to be on that commission. But the story also lays out how Joe Tate blocked some utility reform bills from getting to the House floor, especially during lame duck. And the story even quotes former Democratic State Representative Rachel Hood, who said, and I'm quoting here, "There was a quiet, steady refusal to do anything but ignore the utility bills." Oh, and by the way, that DTE insider Whitmer appointed to the Michigan Public Service Commission, which oversees utilities in the state, well, her name is Shaquilla Myers, who also happened to serve as Joe Tate's chief of staff. What were the odds? With such crookedness and cronyism, you can understand why Congresswoman Haley Stevens was so giddy to get Joe Tate's endorsement. But what did you expect from the same person who thinks that Chuck Schumer is doing a hell of a job in the United States Senate? Now, Haley's week got a little worse, too, when her campaign posted that she got the endorsement of Shockwave Pitchford, who's a Berrien County commissioner. The problem? Pitchford never endorsed her and even retweeted her campaign's announcement with his own announcement saying, "I literally never endorsed her or heard a word from her team." I promise you, I have never talked to anyone, emailed anyone about endorsements, or even hinted that I would be open to endorsing her. Now, of course, that led Stevens to later on blame her communications team for the mistake because when in doubt, blame others. And Stevens is also receiving big money from corporate donors and big money from dark money PACs. And also, hey, from AIPAC, as she, of course, refuses to ever want to hold Israel's right-wing government to account for its genocide of the Palestinian people. Now, the winner of that Democratic primary faces off against Florida Mike Rogers, who just doesn't know when to give up. But here's the problem. Why would he? Because I fear if Haley Stevens wins the primary next year, Mike Rogers becomes our next senator. Democratic voters, you see, are tired of establishment Democrats not only ceding ground to the authoritarian MAGA Republican Party, but they're tired of watching a Democratic Party that also cedes ground to corporations that are more than happy with Dear Leader in power. And that's why the Democratic Party is suffering in the polls even more than Dear Leader is suffering in the polls right now. They see a Democratic Party that is not only becoming an institution that caters towards its corporate donors, but worse, they see a party that's unwilling to fight back against authoritarianism. Now, there are some Democrats who are fighting back. Don't get me wrong. I know there are some Democrats out there who are fighting back, but we don't have enough leaders on the Democratic Party side who seem willing to join that fight. I mean, they seem more interested and invested in keeping their power, which is why they fear challenges from progressives more than they fear the actual authoritarianism coming from the Trump regime. And that's why there are these stories now floating around how Dear Leader is now offering New York City Mayor Eric Adams and the Republican nominee positions inside the regime so that way they can clear the way for the disgraced and embarrassing Andrew Cuomo to go one-on-one against Democratic primary winner and Democratic Socialist Zoran Memdani. Dear Leader is basically signaling his support for Cuomo, and many Democratic establishment figures in New York are thrilled by that notion. You see, we've seen this kind of crookedness here in Michigan as well. I've talked about, quote, Democratic State Representative Karen Whitsett here a lot in the last 2 years. Not only does she love Dear Leader, but Whitsett loves working with MAGA Republicans in Lansing. She no longer caucuses with Democrats and was the only Democratic vote in favor of the Matt Hall MAGA House Republican budget that cuts $44 million in crucial state programs for working class people. Instead, Matt Hall and MAGA Republicans want to devote that money for road funding without any real investments in affordable public transit to save wear and tear on our roads. And with more and more Americans unable to afford cars nowadays, it seems like another gut punch towards the working class in Michigan. You know what? Karen Whitsett, she doesn't care. No, she doesn't care one bit. Just as she doesn't care that she's voted to gut $300 million from food assistance programs here in Michigan, or how she joined Republicans in hurting Michiganders on Medicaid. As I brought up last week, the MAGA House bill guts funding for violence prevention and public safety, something that has helped lower Detroit's violent crime rate. But she doesn't care. You see, it's all a game to throw more money towards the donor class and to privatize schools and services. I mean, that's what Karen Whitsett voted for, proudly, and she's posted how proud she is of that vote. And that kind of pain that she's delivering to Michigan is the kind of pain that she wants to keep delivering for District 7 on that Detroit City Council. But the voters are signaling they want to change from Democrats like Karen Whitsett, who will work with MAGA Republicans and work with corporate donors, where it's always a perpetual revolving door of corruption. No, they want to change. They want someone to represent the working class and to fight for the working class. And voters in Detroit's District 7 sent a loud message when Democratic Socialist Denzel McCampbell received more votes than anyone else in that primary race, including Karen Whitsett. But the fight is just beginning as the two have to battle it out in November. Denzel McCampbell is my guest here this week, and he's coming up right after these quick words. You're listening to LOL.
He spent nearly 25 years working as a liberal voice in conservative talk radio across the state, and he's still a somewhat stable person. It's the Left of Lansing podcast with Pat Johnston. You can find archives of the podcast, plus Pat's musings on other topics in written form at leftoflansing.com. Left of Lansing archives are available wherever you get your podcasts. And now Left of Lansing is available on YouTube. We'd like to thank Audio Boom for distributing all our episodes so we can share progressive, otherwise known as common sense, values across Michigan and the country. Now, here's Pat Johnston.
I'd just like to send a quick thank you to those of you who share episodes of the show, whether it's through social media or my Left of Lansing videos on YouTube, or whether it's through just good old-fashioned word of mouth. As I explained last week, this venture doesn't receive any assistance from some dark money group, which we sadly learned last week is funding some so-called liberal podcasters who are then beholden to push a party line. And, of course, dark money groups and billionaires finance MAGA Republican podcasters and influencers. That's always been known and always been in practice. But Left of Lansing is truly an independent progressive cause. And because of that, the only real way that I can expand and reach a bigger audience is through you. And I appreciate everyone who takes about 45 minutes out of your week to listen to the show. And even more, I appreciate everything that you do to let others know that, hey, there's this guy in mid-Michigan who's not only presenting a true common sense progressive viewpoint, but who isn't afraid to criticize those we consider to be on our side if they're doing wrong. So I thank you for your support, and judging by our numbers here this year, hey, they are increasing, and that is all thanks to you. All right, last month, during the primary races in Detroit, there was an upset victory for a Detroit City Council seat in that primary. Denzel McCampbell defeated so-called Democratic State Representative Karen Whitsett, community organizer Bobby Johnston, and Regina Ross, who was runner-up in 2021 for that same seat. He's trying to become the second Democratic Socialist to win a seat on the City Council and is a member of the Democratic Socialist of America. And he's also received the support from a number of progressive organizations and activists, including the Working Families Party. And while he did win the primary, he will have to face State Representative Whitsett again here in the general election on November the 4th. And unlike Ms. Whitsett, who's also backed by billionaire political action committees, Denzel McCampbell is raising money and gaining recognition by connecting with the Detroiters there in District 7. And I'm more than pleased that he has decided to join us here for a few moments to talk about his campaign and his vision here for Detroit. So Denzel McCampbell, thanks so much for stopping by here on Left in Lansing here this week.
Oh, thank you for having me, Pat.
It's been described in certain publications and papers that your primary win last month was, quote unquote, an upset. Did it seem that way to you, or did you have a pretty good feeling that you and your campaign team struck a nerve and connected with enough voters in your district to pull off that win?
In the first place, I'm deeply appreciative of the voters in District 7 for believing in our campaign, our vision, and making us a top vote getter. Our campaign was rooted in direct voter contact. And I tell folks of meeting folks where they are, door knocking, phone calling, community meetings, community events. We tried to be everywhere and anywhere that we could be connecting with voters. And that was the response that we heard, that not only folks appreciated us being out there and not just being another name on the ballot or depending on name recognition or anything like that, that we were actually asking folks, what do they want to see change in District 7 in the city of Detroit, and sharing our thoughts and vision around that and really building something up together. So I know it may sound cliche to say that we're building a movement, but we're really inviting folks into the campaign and building up a campaign that's reflective of the needs of District 7. And I believe that goes into the results that we saw on August 5th.
When you were out and about and talking to a lot of the voters, what kinds of concerns did you hear from them?
One is making sure that we're addressing the basic needs of folks in District 7. One thing I bring up is that not only do we need to have good paying union jobs in the district, but we also have to make sure that we are having full service grocery stores for fresh food, that we're having pharmacies accessible for folks who are in need of health care, that we're having places for community to gather, whether that is coffee shops or, restaurants or recreation centers, community centers for folks to be, that we are having youth programming and recreation and mentorship programs for our young people so that they see a future, that community wraps their arms around them, that we're actually raising our children as a village. Also taking care of our seniors. I have proposed that we have a dedicated senior services office in the administration that's a one-stop shop for our seniors to call in to get resources and services. So I really believe that our city government should be there to be responsive and actually taking action on making sure that folks have their basic needs covered. And that's what has really resonated with folks. As I talk about public safety, really talking about getting towards the preventative aspect of, we know that folks need jobs. We know that folks need education, but we also have the community violence intervention programs that have violence interrupters right here known in the district that are stopping violence from happening. And we need to actually make sure that they have the funding and the connections in our city government to make that happen. So these are things that I'm going out to talk to folks about, and people are really, when I start to talk about it, you just see like a light bulb go off and folks are like, yes, that's absolutely what we need.
If you don't mind me asking you, I spoke with Ivan Diaz. He was a former Grand Rapids City Councilman, and he's now running for a state Senate seat on the west side here of the state. Mm-hmm. And he's running also as a Democratic Socialist. So I'd like to ask you what I asked Mr. Diaz, because I've got to believe this probably came up once or twice to you. If a voter comes up to you and does ask you, hey, I like some of your ideas, everything that you were just talking about here, but what is exactly a Democratic Socialist? How do you respond to that?
I always lead with the values and actually what does it mean for folks. For me, being a Democratic Socialist is that we are actually making sure that people, our constituents, folks in the neighborhood, that they have the power and that their government is responsive to them, not corporate interests, not billionaires, not that we're going out here to just make deals behind closed doors and forgetting the people. And how that looks is making sure that folks have housing, period, right? That folks have freedom of movement. That's why I talk about having a reliable and frequent public transportation system here in Detroit and in the region. That folks have food on their tables. That's why I lift up that we have to have fresh food in grocery stores and not actually cut the programs that our residents depend on. That we are centering the working class, that we are making sure that workplace rights and labor rights are respected and uplifted, and that our dollars are going to our neighborhoods and to our people and not the pockets of wealthy CEOs and billionaires that already have enough and most likely have gotten that because we have continued to give our tax dollars away to those folks while our neighborhoods suffer. So that's what it means to be a Democratic Socialist to me. And that is what we are conveying on the doors, that we are making sure that our government is putting people first, that we're putting people over profit, and that we're addressing the needs of our folks. Because if we don't have strong neighborhoods, if we don't have strong communities, if we don't have folks that continue to have their needs addressed, nothing else will matter. And our city will be on the decline. So that's what I'm pushing here, a positive vision that centers the people.
All right. So then your answer right there on why you are a Democratic Socialist and how you are fighting for a stronger, a more prosperous working class, combined with all of the concerns that you heard from voters during your campaign, bringing this all together, is that why you decided that you had to run for District 7 on the Detroit City Council? Because you felt like city leadership was either failing or just not hearing these concerns from the people?
And, we'll have a new mayor. We'll have a few new folks on city council. I think what you're seeing, and it's not just in Detroit, I think we've seen it across the state and across the country, that folks are looking for elected officials that are going to address and I keep saying it because I think it's key to focus on that. As we've seen Zohran Mamdani in New York City talk about affordability and making sure that New York City is an affordable place, we see the similar things here in Detroit. Housing costs are going up. Rent is unaffordable for a lot of folks. Folks are being taken advantage of by investors that allow houses to just go dilapidated. Folks aren't able to get around in the city. We have high auto insurance, and yet we have households that 1 in 3 households do not have a car. So folks aren't able to get around to opportunities and jobs. That is the focus that I really am running for Detroit City Council to center us on. And I believe the City Council, we have great power that has been granted to us through the city charter. I'm a former charter revision commissioner, so I know how our government is structured. And I know the power that we have with City Council. And I'm really running to work together with my colleagues to put people first. And I believe having that another person on the council with that vision will help move us forward.
Denzel, where did your politics or your political views develop? I mean, did you always consider yourself progressive or like a Democratic Socialist, or did that develop over time, especially as our country's political landscape has shifted here in the last decade or so?
I think back to really my parents. My mom grew up 25 miles outside of Selma, Alabama during the Jim Crow era. And she told me about her memories of dogs, hoses, folks being beaten, black folks being beaten just for their right to vote. My mom, she was someone who was living with lupus, so she had disability and really needed to have a strong social safety net to make sure that she had what she needed, but also raising a young boy. My dad retired from the UAW. My mom also retired from the UAW. I come from a UAW family. So workers' rights and labor rights and collective bargaining, having access and having the things that I needed as a child, that really helped form my political view. As I grew up and went to Michigan State University, I did college organizing around LGBTQ rights and also around ensuring that our university governance system was actually listening to students. And once I got out of college, I did voting rights and election protection organizing across the state. And I'm formerly the communications and political director for Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. And as I mentioned, I'm a former charter revision commissioner. And I would say, Pat, those things have formed my political view. But I have always believed from that beginning of seeing how our government was suppressing, disenfranchising, allowing black folks to be harmed and killed just to have full rights, and how movement and organizing and collective action changed that to really make sure that we were delivering for folks. And for me, that's the power in our collective action and government and how it should show up for folks. And that's the theme that I carry over into the city council race. And how can we make our city government ensure that we are putting the residents and neighborhoods, the folks who need the most, how are we centering them to lift up everyone to have a good quality of life in the city of Detroit?
Detroit City Council District 7 candidate Denzel McCampbell is my guest here this week. Denzel, you mentioned that you are from a union family. And from that, I assume that you will always try to ensure that a lot of the jobs that come into Detroit are good paying union jobs.
For sure. I think Detroit is a union town. This is the birthplace of the union movement and the labor movement. I think the history of the labor movement, that folks have died and been harmed, to make sure that we have collective bargaining, that we have workplace safety. I want to make sure that we're bringing that to the city council as well. When folks are coming to the council for tax incentives or whatever it may be for development projects, I want to make sure that those jobs that are coming there are union jobs, that we have standards for our workplaces in the city of Detroit, that our job sites are not a place where bosses and CEOs are taking advantage of workers. That's what I'll bring to city council, to make sure that our workers are put first and that we have the view of making sure that these jobs are good paying union jobs as well.
From the people that you've been talking with, the voters there in the district that you want to represent, sounds like to me, you've already kind of alluded to this, but it sounds like that many there are feeling left behind, that let's say in Lansing, a lot of our politicians there seem to throw more money towards wealthy developers rather than actually trying to revitalize the communities in which these developers reside in. I know it's a Detroit City Council seat. Only so much I know that you could really do probably to help with what's happening in Lansing, but do you want to try to give a voice for more affordable housing and community redevelopment, and maybe even push some Democrats to focus on that issue rather than just always shelling out money to corporations?
I am someone, I don't take a dime of corporate PAC dollars. When I talk to folks in the neighborhoods, folks enjoy having a nice downtown, right? I think there's this notion that as we talk about lifting up neighborhoods, that we don't want a nice downtown. No, that is great. But what we are saying is that there has to be resources, focus, and attention on folks in our neighborhoods, and that we have to put people first and not put them in the back of the line in favor of corporate CEOs, billionaires, and developers who are wanting to continue to do stuff downtown. I've also told folks, going to also the power of city council, that yes, there is a lot of things that we have to change on the state level. And me having the experience of working on advocacy on the state level, working in Congress, and also being a Detroit Charter Revision Commissioner, we have to make sure that we're reaching out to folks at the state to say, hey, our preemption laws are stopping us from making progress here in Detroit. We have to make sure that we are going to folks to say that we can improve workplace standards and workforce development here in Detroit if we remove the preemption laws here at the state, that we need more dollars to come down for affordable housing instead of the budget that we just saw last week that my opponent voted for, that actually cuts funding for the city of Detroit, that cuts funding for many programs that our residents depend on, that we need to have advocates on the city council to say, this is what we need in the city of Detroit. Let's put people first, whether you're on the state level, the municipal level, or the federal level, and actually help folks here in the city.
All right. Well, since you just mentioned it, Karen Whitsett, your opponent there in District 7 for the Detroit City Council, she's a state representative, as we've already noted, and she was the only Democrat to vote for the MAGA Matt Hall Republican budget last week in Lansing, a budget that's cutting funding, like you said, for the city of Detroit in a number of ways, but it's also cutting schools, it's cutting public safety, it's cutting money for public health, it's even cutting money for the Attorney General's office while it's suing the Trump regime for its numerous authoritarian steps. So I guess here's my question. How is it that she is able to still garner a significant percentage of support, Denzel? Is it just name recognition alone? I mean, or what is it?
I have talked to residents unprompted that have come to me, since that budget vote, and for a couple other things to say, oh, that's unacceptable. We cannot have that. That's not the leadership that we need. Mm-hmm. I think it is, folks may not know what is going on in Lansing unless, the things that are reported. And, if folks are watching, for example, TV news, they may have just seen that, a Republican budget has passed in the House, the headline, but they may not know that their representative voted for this dangerous bill. And we've released some details on what's actually in the budget. There's been community members who are deeply upset about this vote, but this is a pattern with my opponent of making decisions that are not in the best interest of her district or our District 7 or the city of Detroit. And we need leadership, especially during the time when the Trump administration and MAGA Republicans in Lansing are trying to one up each other of who can cut the most, who can harm the communities that depend on these services and resources the most. And that's not what we need. We don't need someone who will give their vote and be complicit in that. We need folks who will actually put people first. And that's been a theme of our campaign. And we just got to make sure that folks know people's records and what they're standing for. And you know, as you talked about labor unions and union support and community organization support, I'm the only person in this race who has support from labor, has support from community organization, and continues to be present with folks to actually know what we need. We can't have someone who's voting against our interests represent us on city council.
I know that you've done a lot of work when it comes to water affordability and everything, and I still can't believe that Karen Whitsett would vote for a budget that is cutting funding in Detroit for water affordability. I think it's like $10 million in programs for water affordability, and also she voted to help remove millions in water infrastructure projects. I mean, that's just unconscionable. I don't get it.
And this is after, you know, we had a comprehensive water affordability plan that many advocates, including State Senator Stephanie Chang, worked hard to get buy-in from water systems municipalities. And that was on the docket during lame duck, that we could have had a true water affordability program across the state, that we could have had Black maternal health legislation and funding for the state, voting rights, public safety. The list goes on and on, you know, polluter pay, environmental justice bills. Those things were left to die in lame duck because my opponent walked out and refused to vote on them. And I will tell you, Pat, we know we need water to survive. And there are folks that are struggling to pay their water bill simply because they cannot afford it. That is the reality. So folks can go back and forth about, you know, whether they this or that. Folks cannot afford to have a basic thing in our life that we need to survive. So again, as where I'm coming from of making sure that we're centering the most vulnerable folks, water affordability should be a no-brainer. And that should be something that we make sure to have here in the state so people can actually survive. It is disappointing that folks will sit there and vote to cut that funding and also not vote to have a true water affordability plan for folks across the state.
I just have a couple of moments here left with you. You already mentioned that you worked with Progressive Democratic Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, who represents part of Detroit. And as you said, you served as her communications and political director, correct?
Yes.
So then, Denzel, what did you learn while working with Congresswoman Tlaib? And were there certain lessons that you learned watching her in action and watching her represent her congressional district? Lessons that maybe helped you shape your campaign here for District 7?
Absolutely. Congresswoman is someone that you cannot outwork. And you will see her at an event in Southfield in the district. Then the next half hour, and I've seen this, and folks have told me, they said, I just saw her at Southfield, then I saw her in Inkster, and then I saw her on the west side of Detroit. She's someone that you can't outwork, but also she is someone who's committed to constituent services, that when folks are coming to her with a problem, she will stop everything that she's doing to say, if someone doesn't have their lights on, how can we make sure that their lights are cut back on? How can we make sure that they have access to water? Someone may be housing insecure. How do we make sure that they get housing? Her constituent service and helping people is key. And that's something that I really try to have here on the campaign of when I'm door knocking, when folks are making phone calls, when I'm at community meetings, when someone says, hey, this is happening to me, to stop and say, okay, what's going on? How can we make those connections? There may be a long-term solution here, but how can we do some triage to make sure you are covered right now? And that's what we do on the doors. And I think that's something that I would definitely continue as a city council person, constituent services, because, you know, there may be something that, hey, we need to get more funding for this. We need to pass an ordinance, and that may take a little bit more time. And our residents don't have that time to wait. We can make connections now to make sure we're solving that and then providing the long-term solutions. That's what I deeply believe in. And Congresswoman Tlaib has really shown true example of how that works as well.
No, and I love how you put that too. And I love that that is one of the values that you picked up from her. She's always out there connecting with people. She's connecting with her district. She's connecting with the voters out there. And in many ways, she just knows how to outwork other people as well. I've read in so many different publications or on social media, many on the right, but also some Democrats wonder, how is it that Rashida Tlaib is able to keep winning re-election after re-election? And it's exactly what you just mentioned right there, is that she has strong constituent services and she is always out there willing to talk to everybody and make sure that she's hearing everybody's concerns.
You really said it there, Pat, is knowing your district and being in your district, right? And we see similar things here in this District 7 race of I made a commitment that we are going to knock the entire district. We have knocked the entire district. We're going back to folks and such. And also that we're going to be present, that we're going to listen to folks, that we're going to have constituent services while on a campaign and be in touch with people and be on their front porch, be on their phones to make sure we're reaching them. So that's the commitment that I'm bringing to Detroit City Council, to be a true advocate that is in the district, that is connecting to our residents. And I think that's what folks are demanding in this time, to have that true representation.
All right. I've taken up too much of your time. Thanks so much for being on. Before I let you go, how can people learn more about your campaign? And if they would like to be a part of it, how can they do so?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. This has been a great conversation. Again, my name is Denzel McCampbell, running for Detroit City Council here in District 7. Folks can go to our website at www.denzelfordetroit.com. That is all spelled out, FOR for 4. You can sign up to volunteer on the website. You can donate. You can learn more about our platform. I would tell folks is that this is a key race. Even if you're not in the city of Detroit, would love to have folks support. You can come out and door knock with us. If you know anyone in the city, please share this information about what you heard. A lot of folks do not pay attention to the municipal elections. And now, again, what we're seeing on the federal level, some of what we're seeing on the state level, our municipal government will most likely and continues to be the front line against the attacks that we're seeing from the MAGA right. So we really have to make sure that we have strong folks on the Detroit City Council.
And again, change happens faster always on the local level as well.
Absolutely.
All right, Denzel McCampbell, thank you so very much for being on. Good luck to you this fall, and we'll be watching your race and reporting on it here on Left of Lansing. Have a good one.
You too. Thank you.
It's the Left of Lansing podcast with Pat Johnston. Need to give Pat a piece of your mind? Or do you have some stories you think Pat should cover? Email him at leftoflansing@gmail.com. And if you have Michigan beer ideas for Pat, he'll love you even more. Now, here's Pat.
Special thanks again to Denzel McCampbell for visiting Michigan's premier progressive podcast. I'll provide links to Denzel's campaign page and also his Facebook page so you can learn more. And I'll say it again, it's amazing and astonishing to me that Karen Whitsett has the gall to run for this District 7 seat, considering how much she's hurt working class Detroiters. Oh, sure, Karen's got the backing of big money developers in Detroit, but not from the people. According to Malachi Barrett from Bridge Detroit, Whitsett received some $11,000 for her primary campaign from Rock Holdings, which is a corporate PAC funded by Dan Gilbert, co-owner of Rocket Mortgage and founder of Rock Ventures. And Barrett reports that all of Whitsett's money came from political action committees, while she reported no individual donors. Zero, zilch, nada. Whitsett claims that she's brought so much money from Lansing to Detroit, but who really believes that? Do Detroiters really feel it? Karen Whitsett's done some pretty despicable things in Lansing here lately, but voting for that crap of a MAGA Republican budget bill is perhaps the worst action she's ever taken. I already shared how her vote is hurting Detroiters and Michiganders, but let me mention another part from that bill, and it's something that I mentioned last week, but I've got to repeat it. Karen Whitsett and her new MAGA Republican buddies voted to gut some $21 million in dental care for adults, who rely on Medicaid-managed plans. I don't get it, but maybe someone can explain it to me. Maybe Karen can explain it to me. How's cutting $21 million in dental care for adult Michiganders in Detroit and across the entire state an example of sticking up for the working class? How's that really an example of caring for the people there, Karen Whitsett? What a despicable action by a despicable person. All right, I better move on. Time now for the Left of Lansing last call. Speaking of despicable people, Robert Kennedy Jr., who I still cannot believe is the head of this country's Health and Human Services Department, well, he is putting millions of American lives in danger. Kennedy announced last spring that the Centers for Disease Control would quit recommending the COVID-19 vaccine for healthy women and healthy children. And just a week or so ago, the Food and Drug Administration followed suit, announcing it changed its labels on vaccines, saying it should only be given to people 65 and older and to young people who can prove that they've got at least one pre-existing condition. It's dire. Dr. Pamela Rockwell, clinical professor of family medicine at the University of Michigan Medical School, and who's also the co-chair of U of M's immunization committee. That's what she told the Detroit Free Press this week. And Dr. Rockwell said, and I'm going to quote here, "I try to be an advocate for all my patients, whether it's inpatient or outpatient, and explain everything to them. Nothing is without risk in life. Nothing. Getting on an airplane is not without risk. But the risks that have been pushed about vaccines are just so hyperbolic compared with the benefits of vaccinating." And Dr. Rockwell continued, "The real sad and unfortunate thing is I can no longer say the CDC is a trustworthy source." In Michigan Advance, Dr. Molly O'Shea, a pediatrician in Bloomfield Township, who's also a member of the teaching faculty for the residency program at Children's Hospital of Michigan, told Kyle Davidson that having the vaccine as your baseline exposure to COVID-19 comes with some safety from complications from the illnesses, including multi-inflammatory system response, long COVID, and others. I mean, everyone, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? And how is this freedom? How is this freedom? I mean, I get how some people refuse to want to take the COVID vaccine. Okay, well, I actually don't, but they argued it was their right and their freedom to refuse the vaccine. Okay, fine. So they wanted to live with the risks. But how is it freedom? All right, how is it freedom to block millions of Americans who want this scientifically researched vaccine that is proven to help save lives? Our bodies, our choice, right? And what will insurance companies do now? Really, what will they do? I mean, will they cover the vaccine? What's the cost-benefit analysis going to reveal for them, as we know insurance companies always try to cover the least possible? I mean, the CDC's chief objected to Kennedy's orders, and of course then she was fired by dear leader Trump. That led then to a mass exodus of other scientists and researchers from the CDC, which is kind of what Kennedy and his band of anti-medical terrorists always wanted. And I say terrorists, okay, because how quickly we've all forgotten how a shooter walked into the CDC headquarters to try to kill people over the vaccine, and that terrorist killed a police officer. Now, what did dear leader have to say about that? I mean, did dear leader condemn the killing? Did dear leader condemn those for spreading false rumors about the vaccine or vaccines in general? Nope. He's been silent. Neither dear leader nor J.D. Vance could really be bothered to attend DeKalb County, Georgia police officer David Rose's funeral. They couldn't be bothered with that. So much for backing the blue. Meanwhile, in backwards Florida, the state's MAGA nutball Surgeon General this week announced that Florida will end all state vaccine mandates. Not just COVID, every mandate, all of them. That includes shots for polio, mumps, chickenpox, measles, and hepatitis B. What? This has professional health officials yelling how this will endanger the lives of thousands and thousands of children in that state. I mean, the World Health Organization says that immunizations have saved over 150 million lives. All 50 states have these requirements. What are we doing here? Look, I haven't made any endorsement in the Democratic primary race for the U.S. Senate in Michigan, but I have to play this clip from progressive candidate Dr. Abdul Al-Sayed when he appeared on MSNBC last week to talk about these reckless moves from Kennedy's Health and Human Services Department. And I think it also easily applies to what's happening in Florida. Listen.
Appointing him in the first place was a betrayal, and we all kind of knew that this is where this was headed. We need leadership that A, puts science first, and B, puts the public's health above all. This is a national security issue. I mean, we should know because we lived through a pandemic just, 5 years ago? How risky it might be to have a CDC that's been gutted over this.
Dr. Abdul Al-Sayed is absolutely spot on by declaring what Kennedy is doing as a national security threat to this country because that's what it is. He's putting lives in danger on crackpot theories that have no scientific basis. Add to it how Kennedy canceled $500 million in funding for contracts and vaccine development. People are going to die while some clown like Kennedy tells America to trust him over those who've spent essentially their lives studying vaccines. I mean, it's the whole don't trust the experts line that we hear endlessly from MAGA Republicans and influencers over and over and over. Now, look, I'll be honest. Did the CDC get some things wrong during COVID? Sure, it was a brand new disease. We were learning on the fly. And sure, maybe Anthony Fauci saying initially that the vaccines were near perfect. Yeah, that was probably wrong because nothing is near perfect. But Dr. El-Sayed is correct when he says it's hard to convince some Americans that pharmaceutical companies are out there for their best interest when Americans can't afford drugs and are cut out of our healthcare system. So yeah, that's a problem too, which is why we need universal healthcare. But I'll be honest with you. One of the parts that I feared the most of a return of the Trump regime last year was the prospect of Kennedy running this nation's Health and Human Services Department. And now my worst fears have come to fruition. Oh, wait. We're learning from the CDC this week that rabies outbreaks appear to be on the rise. NBC reported on the story and provided this fantastic little tidbit. Listen, as rabies seems to be spreading more in wildlife, veterinarians are especially worried about vaccine hesitancy spreading among pet owners, a dangerous trend that could lead to more dogs and their owners becoming infected. A 2023 study published in the journal Vaccine found in a nationally representative sample of Americans that nearly 40% believe canine vaccines were unsafe and 37% believed that vaccines could lead their dogs to develop cognitive issues such as autism. You know, 21 years ago, Billy Joe Armstrong and Green Day released the highly acclaimed American Idiot album. Armstrong said, he proclaims right there, he says, I don't want to become an American idiot. Well, I fear we're already there.
You're listening to the Left of Lansing podcast. The music you're hearing is by Wander Beats. To hear the latest project, check out Space Leopard on your favorite streaming site. Now back to our favorite progressive voice in Michigan. It's Pat Johnston.
Special thanks again to Denzel McCampbell for joining the show here this week. As I said, I will provide links to his campaign site wherever you're listening to the show. And what a monumental victory it would be to have Denzel representing District 7 in Detroit. It would also be a major win for working-class Detroiters, and it would also mean the Detroit City Council will have seated 2 Democratic Socialists. District 6 Council member Gabriela Santiago Romero is also a Democratic Socialist, and unlike Denzel McCampbell's MAGA opponent, Karen Whitsett, Santiago Romero rejected donations from Dan Gilbert's Political Action Committee. There's something happening here. And what it is? Well, I think it's actually exactly clear. Next week, Tom Perkins from The Guardian will join me. Let me know what you think of the show by emailing me, leftoflansing@gmail.com. Oh, and this Sunday, the Detroit Lions kick off the 2025 campaign, so I have to give you my regular season prediction for the Honolulu Blue and Silver, because it appears to me that national pundits out there believe the Lions are yesterday's news. They're no longer the shiny new object to follow, and I think that's exactly where head coach Dan Campbell wants his team to be, feeling unappreciated and feeling dismissed. The Lions lose more games this year than last, but they'll be a better football team this year. The 2025 Detroit Lions finish the season with a 12-5 record and will be more than ready when playoff time hits. Jot that down. Until next week, remember, take the battle to them. Thank you, Michigan.
The Left of Lansing podcast was produced by Pat Johnston, written by Pat Johnston, researched by Pat Johnston, edited by Pat Johnston, and hosted by, yes, Pat Johnston. Technical assistance by Dr. Heather. And thanks to our good friend Kirsten for the awesome podcast logo. Remember to visit leftoflansing.com for more news and information. Thanks again for listening to the Left of Lansing podcast.